what if, this key person leaves the business? What if this key supplier goes under? What if our, bank puts a hold on our account and we can't get any money out?
If you're running an online business and you're not making the profits that you deserve, the chances are you're getting it wrong. Now, today we're going to be sitting down with a man who's helped various e-commerce businesses scale to 6 figures and beyond without burning cash on stuff that doesn't work. Gary Baker from Ecom 180 has helped businesses flip the struggling stores into money-making machines. Today, we're going to talk through some of the strategies that he's using right now that has helped brands not only survive, but thrive, even when others are failing. Now, if you miss it, you're going to keep guessing. You're going to keep wasting money on things that don't work. You're going to keep wondering while others are scaling and you're not. This conversation could be the breakthrough that you've been waiting for. So after all that, welcome to the Director First podcast, Gary. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, Chris. Brilliant to be here. Lovely to see you as always.
Top man. Listen, for people who are watching here, let's dive into really who is Gary Baker? What's your story? How did you get here today?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an e-commerce consultant specializing in turnarounds. So we take stuck or struggling e-commerce businesses and turn them into profitable, what we call profitable growth stories. And I've been involved in the internet and e-commerce for over 20 years now. I started off with a web development company, which I sold a few years later. And since then, I've started and run a number of e-commerce ventures from food to fashion. And the Ecom 180 is the culmination of all those learnings, most of the mistakes, really, and how we've overcome a lot of the common scenarios that business owners encounter every day. But for them, it's a new thing, and we're able to then help them through that.
Listen, we learn so much more from our mistakes, don't we? I mean, when it's going good and sales are flying in and profits are there, it's sort of, it's easy to get lazy. It's like when Rome is burning, that's when we tend to pick up the life lessons. That's how I pick up life lessons anyway. When my horse is really out the air with these types of things.
Yeah.
So that sort of led to Ecom 180, and like I say, it's not your first rodeo. You've done this for years and years. For you personally, what was your biggest turning point in your career that sort of brought you to this place?
I think it was the culmination of having done the same thing over and over again and made the same mistakes over and over again. I think you kind of see that you're going down that kind of whirlpool, that rabbit hole, and you feel you can't stop yourself. And I was doing that so often, and then figuring out how to actually prevent that from happening. And then other people started asking me to help them and saying, well, how did you do that? And I went, well, I was at the point in my last business where I was able to hand it over. I had an MD, I had, staff and management and everything. So I was able to hand it all over and focus on this. And it's been an absolute joy. It's been a real sort of pleasure going into these, what can be really fantastic businesses and helping them see the things that maybe they can't see. Because we can all see things in other people's businesses that, when it's your own business, you can't pick up on. We have this sort of blind spot to it. But you look at someone else's business and you go, oh yeah, I can see exactly what's going on there. So it's quite nice to be able to do that and then to be able to help people. And having been through really dark times myself in business, the highs are amazing, but you tend to remember the bad times, a lot more. And so I understand what they're feeling, I understand what they're going through, and being able to relate to that, I think, is really useful as well.
Listen, I mean, we've known each other professionally for some years, and I know I've assisted some of these people that perhaps insolvency was a route that they had to go down, but I want to touch on that because that's important, and it's exactly the same for me. I can relate to directors who are going through insolvency because I've been there. Like I have been through there, what was probably the worst time of my life. I come out the other end of it, and I've got that real life experience, and I've had real bad times in business. You know, I remember that there were times that I was just driving around, frightened to not go into the office because I just, you know, it was all over my face what was going on. I couldn't face people. I wasn't, it was like I couldn't sleep at night. I wasn't eating properly. I was doing all the things that you shouldn't be doing to you. And it never felt like it was going to end. And I can draw on that experience to help other people. Like I really know what they're going through. And, and, and directors need to know that. They need to know that they're not alone in facing what they're facing right now. And some people either don't tell the truth about where they've been, or they sort of gloss over it like everything's great and you do this, you do that, you're going to skip into the sunset. And listen, the reality is very different. Business is a battleground, and you know the impact it can have on you emotionally, financially, spiritually, blooming. You know, when it's bad, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you raised a couple of really interesting points there. The first being that we think we're alone. And the first thing is to reassure that you're not alone. This, you know, pretty much everybody that, you know, goes through some kind of turmoil in their business at some point. And it just varies in severity. Some people are able to get through it quite quickly, and a lot of that is luck. Others are, you know, aren't so able to get through it quickly, and they need help, or it just happens so quickly they don't realize it. But it is, you know, nobody's alone in this, and I think a lot of kind of business is very isolated. In e-commerce, it is particularly where people aren't talking about each other, and when they do talk to each other, they're not talking about the bad things that are happening. And a common thing that we'll sort of talk about is that people say, "How's business?" And you go, "Oh, great." And you go, "Would it be nice to actually mean that for a change?"
Yeah.
Because so often it's not great. It's like, "Oh no, I can't believe I've got, you know, I'm standing here talking to you. I'm not talking about us, but you know, talking to a business owner and standing to talk to them, and I know that they, in their mind, they just thinking about what, you know, all the fires that they've got to put out when they've got to get back to the office." And you know, in worst case scenarios, the calls that they're dodging, and every time the phone rings or something comes through the post or an email comes in, they stiffen up and they get that, you know, anxious feeling. And you know, at some point, you got to go, well, you know, business is supposed to be enjoyable. Owning your own business is supposed to be fun and exciting, and it's not. So you know, let's do something about that.
I mean, what are the? And I know I like what you said about you made the same mistake over and over again, because I'm that guy as well. I'd like to say that I learned the first time, but I've got to feel quite a lot of pain before my brain actually goes, you know
Yeah.
what, you better change, kid. Like I have to feel a little bit of pain. And so, what were the mistakes that you made on early? That you made early on in your business that you see other e-commerce business owners, and not just e-commerce business owners, all business owners making
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. I think at one point there was certainly complacency. I think is a big one. So in the early days, one of the businesses just took off very, very quickly, and you know, within a very short period we did 500,000, and then we 1 million, and so it was just, you know, it was almost relentless. And all we were doing was just going, "Oh, this is amazing, we're having parties, we were doing all this kind of stuff, these lavish Christmas parties, for example, and we're doing all," and then it all went bang. And we had a
Like a Wolf of
combination
Wall
of,
Street party. Was there any flying
well, it wasn't quite
midgets?
that. No, it
Okay.
was maybe more tame than that. But yeah, I don't want to get into too much trouble on a podcast. Um, but what it was we got complacent, so we didn't actually plan for, you know, bad things happening, and we just you just think the most recent experience, that's what it's always going to be like. And after that's happened 2 or 3 times, you realize, well, hang on, that's not how it happens. And Jim Rohn is a great motivational speaker. He used to have the saying that there's 4 seasons. Everything has 4 seasons, and in business there's 4 seasons. And you have a winter, you have a spring, you have a summer, you have an autumn, and every year you're going to have one of those seasons. And the thing to do is in the spring and the summer is to prepare for the autumn and the winter. Because if you don't, then the autumn and winters become really bleak and very cold and miserable. But if you've prepared for them in the spring and the summer, then you've got something set aside. So I think that's probably, complacency was a big thing. And then there were just silly kind of things. I did a rebranding at one point that just failed miserably.
Gary, before we go on to that next bit, can I just dig back into what you've just said there and sort of not planning for bad times? So, because you're right, if it's going good, listen, it's going to change, okay?
Yeah.
And if it's going bad, fingers crossed, if you take some advice, it might change as well. But everything in business is transient, isn't it? You know, it's like we can get caught up in everything's going okay, this will be great forever. What are some practical advice to help business owners plan for bad times? What should they be doing? What shouldn't they be doing?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is just be extremely frugal, to the point of being miserly. In one of the businesses, we actually ended up banning Post-it notes because people were using Post-it notes just for normal notes. So we're going, well, we have piles of scrap paper where the printer has chewed something up or something like that. There's your note paper. And these Post-it notes weren't costing a fortune, but it got into the mindset of that we're not squandering money because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So I would say be extremely frugal. When you start a business, you don't throw money around. You tend to like, okay, well, do I really need this? And can I get it secondhand? Can I get it cheaper? Can I whatever? So we bought chairs and desks and everything off Facebook Marketplace, and we did all this kind of thing to try and preserve that cash. And then the second part of it is whatever money you get in, put a certain amount aside into an account, a little bit like we always recommend having a separate tax account, and do a similar sort of thing. But this is your kind of emergency account. This is, where things completely, a little bit like that. And you just have to be extremely disciplined never to touch it. So we did one where we had like a lump sum of cash. We put it into an account that you couldn't withdraw from until 12 months later. So we were forced to do that. So if we needed that money, we could have borrowed against it, but we couldn't use that.
Was it a high interest bearing account?
Yeah, it's sort of, I mean, it's kind of, like a term deposit type thing is usually a good one. And then the third element is to create scenarios. So there's 2 elements to this. First of all, you what we just call what if scenarios. What if, this key person leaves the business? What if this key supplier goes under? What if our, bank puts a hold on our account and we can't get any money out? All these kind of scenarios. We went as far as, and now even as far as, once we've covered all the things that actually could happen, we go, what if there was a hot air balloon landed on the roof and crashed into the building? We create ridiculous scenarios so that they can be absolutely planned for. So if something happens, you are able to deal with it because you've already covered that scenario. Sometimes it's written down, sometimes it's just kind of talked about. And the second element of that scenario is to create a profit and loss and cash flow for the worst times. So what will these look like if these scenarios happen and our sales drop by 40%? What does that look like? And at what point do we need to take action? So if your sales drop by 40%, you might be able to keep going for maybe 3 months, maybe 2 months, who knows? Depends on what your fixed costs are like. At what point do we need to start laying off staff? At what point do we need to lay off or cut third parties that are assisting in the business? At what point do we start selling stock at a reduced price to get money in, and all these sorts of things. So if that happens, and that scenario of you lose a massive customer or a big supplier goes under, you've already planned for that. You've got that in place already, so you can action it straight away. It's not the worst response to any kind of bad case scenario is a panicked response, because a panicked response is usually only to fix the feeling that you're having right now. It's not to fix the actual cause of the problem or provide a solution that's going to last 3-6 months from now. So we do that sort of planning so that we can actually envisage what things might be like, and then come back all the way to the beginning and go, what can I do today to stop those things from happening? Okay, so, well, don't be reliant on one major supplier. Don't have one key staff member who knows everything and does everything and controls everything. Don't have one bank account. Don't have one credit card processing account, etc., etc. So that you're actually then using everything that you've role played or scenarioed, and you're bringing it back to now, going, what can we do that we can do to prevent this from going wrong? And a key part of that is insurance. It's an element that's often left out. Certainly, a lot of the businesses that I look at, when we ask about insurance, they go, oh yeah, we've got something, but it's not tailored to their business, and they're not following the guidelines in the insurance that mean they will actually get paid out if something goes wrong. So a classic example in a lot of businesses with stock is that stock has to be kept a certain amount off the floor, usually 15-20 centimeters, might be a little bit higher. And you'll find box loads and box loads of stock on the floor. So if there's a flood, or if there's a fire and the sprinklers come on and the building floods, well, all of that stock is not going to be covered. The assessor's going to come in and look at it and go, well, it's all on the floor. We can't cover it. And so just when you need that money, you're not going to be able to get it. And it's hard enough getting the money in the first place. So yeah. A lot of it is that sort of element of the scenarios is all about risk mitigation. What risks can I foresee? What is going to break things in the future? What could break things in the future? And what can I do about it now to stop that from happening, or at least minimize the chances of it happening?
Really good answer, that. Thank you. And I'm sorry, and I stopped you. You was going on to another mistake that that you saw people making before I asked to dive into that last one. Sorry for jumping in on your chain of thought.
Yeah, I mean, the mistakes are lengthy. I mean, there's a lot of them. It's I mean, that one was a rebranding. So I took a really good business, and we wanted to take it in a different direction, and we rebranded and took it in the different direction, which failed miserably. And then we couldn't reverse it. We alienated all our customers, and so ego. The lesson out of that was ego. We were doing quite a lot of ego-related things. It was a fashion company, so we were all over London Fashion Week, and we were in Vogue, and it was just ridiculous. That's what we were targeting, but our customers weren't. We had, completely missed what our customers were actually coming to us for, and we went off on an ego trip and basically killed the business. So I think there's, and that's something you with owners, business owners, is something they don't do very much of, and it's something we implemented. It's one of the first things we do is start surveys. So we're running surveys constantly with customers, both with people just coming to the site, people who have already bought, people who've returned things, and whatever surveys we can run. We just want to get as much information as possible so that we can understand that customer and not let our ego drag us away from what really matters, and focusing on designing new fancy products, or spending huge amounts of money on a new website that is completely unnecessary, for example. So the ego side of it is not something that you necessarily understand or recognize that you're doing at the moment, but it's something that comes out in the actions. and it's harder for the owner or the directors to actually see that's what they're doing. It's a lot easier for someone outside to just go, why are you doing that? And trying to get an answer that really justifies the value of it, so that it's not something as that they went, I want to be like X company. Okay, but you're sort of £100 million away from being X company. You've got to be yourself and then build up to that if that's what you want to be. So I think the kind of elements of that go into employment as well. The number of people that you employ. So people often talk, and it happened to me all the time. People say, "Oh, how many people did you employ?" Now, if you only employ like 2, you sort of feel a little bit kind of, oh, it's 2. I mean, nowadays I would say that's a really good thing to do. But at one point we had 20 people, and we could have done it with 8. And I think but there was ego. It's like, oh, well, let's get more people in. We've got all the space. Let's fill the space, and we can have all these people. And then once again, we can have these massive like parties and Christmas parties and this sort of thing. And the ego, then you suddenly, get to a point where you got, okay, this wage bill's pretty high now. How are we going to pay this? And then you have to start laying people off. So, you come down to earth pretty quickly.
I mean, there's so much, talking about planning, and, we can look to the future, and the key to planning is to have accurate numbers, isn't it? And most people, that they don't understand the importance of a regular, accurate profit and loss, a rolling cash flow to see what's coming through. But, that profit and loss will tell me whether I'm making money, where I'm spending money. I've got to go through it once a month. And like, it's the stuff that I can be cutting. It is the stuff that you can be cutting out of your business. Are you spending money unnecessarily? Because that's the only way to make accurate decisions going forward. But I loved how you said and then I've got to get back to today. I've got to keep it in the day in my business. Like, I spoke to a friend of mine. He's got something going on at the moment, and like, I have a head that will run away with itself, like, very, very easily. But I've got to come back to going, right, it's Wednesday today. What can I do to push my business forward? And sometimes it's just as simple as, when I'm on the phone to a client, give them my undivided attention and try and give them the best advice, and let the marketing look after itself, let the referral network look after itself, because today I've set that in motion early, and there's nothing else I can do today. I've just got to, because I think a lot of people also, they can get bogged down in strategy, and they just stop with the tactical stuff, which is like being in the trenches day in, day out. Because we could all spend our lifetime on training courses, with consultants, on masterminds. I'm planning to do this, Chris. I'm really, actually, sometimes we've just got to get our hands dirty, haven't we?
Yeah, and when a business starts getting into trouble, you find that the foundations have been left alone too long. So the things that got them there before they started struggling are not the things that they're continuing with. And this is the and this is your profit and loss, your cash flow, that sort of thing. But we have now a daily compass that we get everyone to do. And these are KPIs that you fill in manually every day. We don't have it automated everything. I want the owners to actually manually put these numbers in, and then understand how the numbers are working and how they're correlating. And when we adjust one of the numbers, what effect it has on the others. And it takes 2 or 3 minutes. It's very, very quick. It's not complicated. It's a Google sheet, and that's it. And those that keep doing it every single day without fail, you see the progress, you see things happening, you see them growing. Those who stop because they feel they've got other more important things to do, the business starts going back down again. And it's that the daily disciplines, if you like, of going, the first hour that I'm working, whether it's in the office or at home or whatever, these are the core things I've got to do. So in some cases, it might be right. Load up Google ads, see what's going on, make sure nothing's gone crazy there. Right, load up Facebook ads. What's happened there? Is there anything I need adjustments with? Load up my cash flow sheet. Is there anything I need to be looking out for today, or this week? And you have all of these things will only take 5 or 6 minutes each. So you've got maybe half an hour of just every day, just going through each of those things to make sure that you are staying on top of them, that you're actually looking after them and doing something with them. The worst you can do is to abdicate any responsibility for these things, to hand over all your advertising, everything to an agency and just go, oh, I get a report every month and it tells me we're doing great. Or handing it all over to your accountant or bookkeeper and saying, I don't really get numbers, so I just let them handle it. Well, the problem with that is you are the one that has to tell them what to do. Every single accountant that I've ever encountered, I've had to tell them and say to them, oh, what about this? Can we do this? What if we move this over here? Could that make a difference? And if you don't understand how those things work, and if you don't understand what an agency is actually doing on your account and being able to challenge them, then you're not in control of your business. You're letting other people control really, really important elements of your business. And it might be okay when things are going well. There's loads of money coming in, everything seems to be working. But when it goes bad, you've got to get rid of those people because you can't afford them anymore. And now you've got to do it. And you have no idea whatsoever. You can't even see or figure out what's gone wrong. And that's the real danger.
What are the KPIs that you believe a business owner should be tracking daily?
Okay, so it depends on the kind of business. So in e-commerce, we have this framework that I created called CART. So you've got number of customers, average order value, repeat purchase rate, and tracking. So you want to be constantly increasing the number of customers that come into your business. You want to increase the amount that each of them spend, the average order value, and you want to increase the number of times that they come back. And then the final bit of the T of CART is tracking. So you want to track each of those every single day. And the great thing about that is you only need to increase each one of those by 30% to double your turnover. And so if you think, oh, I just need to increase customers by 30%, I increase the amount that each of them spend by 30%, and increase the number of times they come back in a year by 30%. I'll double my turnover. Now that sounds easier than it actually is in real life. It's increasing average order value by 30% is quite a step. But those are the numbers that you can focus on. Outside in other businesses, you might have the number of leads that come in, the conversion rate of those leads, the number of appointments you have. It might be the number of or the amount of time that it takes to close a particular deal or account. The shorter that is, obviously, the more time you've got to do others. So you find the KPIs that actually matter for your business and your industry, and you track those relentlessly. But it's not just tracking them and putting them down in a spreadsheet or wherever you want to put them. It's actually going, how do I improve each of those? And you mentioned earlier about that you look at, what can I do today? I've done all the marketing, I've done everything. What can I do today to move the business forward? Well, when you have these KPIs, it's quite easy because you go, well, which one of those am I going to work on today? And if you only have 3, we go with CART, we've got 4, but the 4th is tracking. But there's 3 KPIs that you can change, you can manipulate. If you've only got 3, then you can literally say, right, this week all we're doing is focusing on how do we get more customers. So let's look at the amount of traffic that's coming to the site. Let's look at the conversion rate. Let's look at all these things. Right, which one of those are we going to narrow it down to and just do for the next week? So you never wake up in the morning going, what am I going to do today? You've got, that's what I'm going to do today. And it means then that your time is used so much more valuably, because whatever you're doing, you're making progress. And it doesn't have to be a massive change or a massive amount of progress, but you're making progress every single day because you're working on the right things.
I love it, mate. Yeah, I mean, I was just noting, and that's what I do when I interview people. I learn myself, and it's like, what I track things on a weekly basis, but you're right, I can be doing this on a daily basis because sometimes, by the end of the week, too much has happened, hasn't it? It's well, I sort of want to steer the conversation to a couple of questions that I think people who are watching me particularly may be interested about, and it's sort of how do you advise a business that is scaling fast but struggling with cash flow?
Yeah. So that's quite a common one, and it's one that if you try and grow very quickly, or you just grow very quickly, you find that other things get in the way, and cash is one of the big ones, because quite often what you're doing is using your existing cash flow to fund that massive growth, when really probably external funding to fund that growth is a better idea. Now, with the cash flow, you've basically got 5 levers that you can work with when you're trying to manage your cash flow. So you can increase your sales, which is what is already happening if you're scaling rapidly. You can decrease your costs. So one of the problems that come in with scaling rapidly is that your costs just ramp up. You find you suddenly have to employ people. You're doing things at a pace that you wouldn't normally do. You can increase your creditor terms. So this is how long it takes to pay people. So even just by doing that, by negotiating an extra week or going from 30 to 45 days can make a massive difference, particularly when you've got that big leap in sales. But it's equally, if you are struggling, with little sales and you've got to get that cash flow back in, that's a really, really handy one to do. You could decrease debtors. So those businesses that have send out invoices and so on, getting that money in, that's got to be the absolute first point of call before you do any of the other things. Just get that money in. Sometimes we'll offer a small discount. Say, look, if you pay by the end of the month, we'll give you 5%, because that 5% just makes it means something to them, because they chances are they've got the money already, but it means that we just get their money really, really quickly, and it's a lot cheaper than invoice discounting. You can also decrease your stock. So you've got, if you have excess stock, it's looking at how can I turn some of that stock into cash. So sometimes when we're growing very rapidly, we will suddenly bring in a lot of stock, or we'll forecast that we're going to grow rapidly, and then we'll bring in order more stock because you get it slightly cheaper. And the problem with that is then your cash is tied up in that stock, and if you can't release that cash, you end up, it becomes extremely difficult. And so the kind of advice, I suppose, and that's probably where most people get stuck. The kind of advice for that, I suppose, would be is sometimes it is better to pay more per item and be in control of the cash than it is to get the discounted value of buying in bulk. If you have a very high stock turnover ratio, so the stock comes in and within 3 or 4 days it's all gone again, well, that's a different story. But if your stock takes 30, 40, 60 days to turn over completely, or even longer in some cases, in some businesses it will, then you're getting that discount, but it's actually costing you a lot because the cash isn't doing any work. The cash is just sitting in that stock. But if you had that cash to do more marketing, it would get greater value. So the thing with scaling is sometimes you don't realize that it's happening. It just it's an overnight thing, and it sort of happens. But for most people, it's a conscious decision. We're going to spend a lot more on advertising. We're going to spend a lot more on this. We're getting this new range of products in, whatever. Is just to, a bit like we talked right in the beginning about the cash flow scenarios, is to do those scenarios, do the P&L scenarios and the cash flow scenarios, and go, what is it actually going to look like? If we increase sales by 40%, in 12 months, what does that look like? What are we going to need to support those sales? In terms of staffing, in terms of stock, in terms of space, in terms of advertising, because we quite often don't take those additional costs into account. We're so excited by the sales that we don't understand that the costs have increased alongside that. And in one case, we had a packaging supplier that was discontinuing 2 key sizes of packaging. And so we had to buy out everything, a big chunk of what they had left. And then we didn't sell very many of the products that fitted in that packaging. So we had piles of this packaging, and which we had got much cheaper. And we thought, this is brilliant because we're going to use it up over the next year and so on. But we didn't have cash for anything else because it was all tied up in this packaging. So it's just thinking about the things that can go wrong before just jumping in and going, even if you negotiated a sale or return type thing, it's quite good. So with products, you sometimes can say as a supplier, well, if I take a big chunk of the stock because we're expecting things to go, we've got a big promotion event happening or whatever, but if we don't sell it, can we send it back? Because if you can't do that, you've got to really, really think about how much that's going to cost you if you can't sell that stock.
That's it. I think, the old saying, isn't it? You prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And we've really got to take those rose-tinted glasses off in business. And I think you touched on it earlier. What does the business look if revenues fall 30%? What does the business look like if costs increase by 20%? All of these, Armageddon scenarios. I know when I do stuff like that, Gary, I sleep better. Especially, I know exactly what my break-even point is, and I know what I can cut my costs to if needs be. I know where I can make cutbacks, and it because I'm a natural worrier. I've read so much personal development, and I know, you mentioned Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins. I've done loads of it, and I'd love to say, as a result of it, I'm a really positive person. But I think deep down, right, I did all that stuff because deep down is, I'm a catastrophizer. I really worry about things, and positive thinking is really helpful, but it doesn't replace financial literacy. I remember when my business shut down, when I went through insolvency, is something happened, and overnight all the big players in the market shut the doors and let everyone go home. And if I'd have understood that, I'd have done the same. But I'd read that much positive thinking material. I was dangerous, and I continued going on for another few months in the hope that things would get better. When actually everything told me that you should have just shut down and put a pin in it at that point. So it all boils down to the same thing, doesn't it? It's financial planning, understanding your numbers, getting those numbers quickly. I mean, you've seen all sorts of different e-commerce businesses. What separates an e-commerce business that succeeds from one that fails?
Yeah, I think it is. There's not a single golden answer for that, unfortunately. It starts off with the product. Is it a product that people want and enough people want? And are you making enough money on each of those products that is sold? So it's starting at that very, very basic foundation. The hardest businesses to get into are ones where you are controlled in some way, where you're price controlled, or where it becomes not quite a commodity, but it is something that is just available everywhere. So you don't have any sort of real differentiating factor because it's the same product that's just available, wherever someone looks. But the difference is sometimes just the case that some businesses generate more cash than others, and the per item profit is just greater or enough that it doesn't, that anything that these blips that happen constantly doesn't create a massive effect. So to give you a kind of concrete example, I suppose, if you have an average order value of £10, your average customer spends £10 in your business, you've got to sell a lot of £10 things to make money out of that. But it's someone, an average order value of maybe £200 or £300, you have to sell a lot less and you're making a lot more on it. So if something goes slightly wrong, the available margin in that £200 product cushions you from that. But the £10 product is a lot harder to cushion. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned the sort of KPIs about average order value and repeat customer rates and so on. And those are sort of quite sort of key indicators. It's one of the things that why we always try to increase the average order value and say, you know, if your order value is £30, how do we get that to £35, which is quite a big leap. And then how do we get that to, after we've done that, to £40? Because it's just not enough to preserve, be a life preserver when something bad goes on. And the thing is, I think the understanding of where you are or what phase your business is in is really important. So we look at it from that there's 4 stages of business. There's healthy businesses, there's stuck, there's struggling, and there's distressed. And the healthy business has, they're doing good sales, they're making a profit, their cash flow is pretty decent. They might sort of hit the odd little blockage with cash and so on, but they tend to get through it fairly easily. Their biggest issue or their biggest danger is complacency, that they think that's going to be the case all the time and they don't plan for it going wrong, because they could only be 2 or 3 months away from going to the next stage, which is stuck. And the stuck businesses, they've kind of hit a wall in their sales. They, you know, might be declining slightly, but they've hit a wall and they just can't break through it. But the costs keep increasing. You know, the staff salaries increase, all the other costs around them increase. So the business is being squeezed from the outside. And they're starting to now maybe look at borrowing money to cover cash flow and that sort of thing, if they haven't already put some of it on their credit cards. And then they soon fall into struggling. And struggling businesses have they've always got cash flow problems. You know, they somehow get through it through borrowing and through credit cards and through everything else, but they now are starting to pile up the debt. And quite often it's quite expensive debt. This is, you know, with personal guarantees, it's these merchant cash advances, which are really expensive. And it's being used to cover day-to-day cash flow rather than growing. And they're now looking at, you know, laying off staff. You know, they've already cut back on marketing. It's quite a vicious sort of whirlpool of that they get sucked into. And then they could quite easily find themselves as a distressed business where they're now pretty much insolvent, if not already insolvent. They can't pay their creditors in time. And there's not much hope that over time they're going to be able to pay them off. And at this point, they've got to start looking at, you know, voluntary liquidations or creditor agreements and this sort of thing. And I think the best businesses understand that they're always in one and moving towards and away from one at any one point. That's fluid. That just because you're healthy today doesn't mean you're always going to be healthy. And just because you're struggling today doesn't mean you're always going to be struggling. And they find those routes through it to ensure their survival and growth afterwards. The businesses that really suffer are the ones that use hope as a strategy. And we always say that hope is a really bad strategy because it just never works. And, you know, you mentioned it earlier, and I've done it as well. And I think that's probably, we were talking about failures right in the beginning, or sort of mistakes that were made. And that's definitely one that I've made time and time again. And and you know, everyone probably does it, because as business owners and entrepreneurs, we're always optimistic and we always go, oh, no, I can see how that's going to work out next year. I can see how it's all going to pan out. And it doesn't, because the core underlying issues haven't been resolved. And so you end up going down those phases of business instead of going up them and getting out of it again. So the successful businesses, they will either intuitively spot that this is happening and go, oh, I need to do something about it. But more often than not, they ask someone, they're getting advice. They have mentors, or they have more senior people who have some experience that they are, like you say, in masterminds with, or other groups that are able to see it from the outside and spot it and go, oh, that's where you're heading. This doesn't look good. The most successful businesses, I would say as well, is they don't rely on their accountant telling them. They know the numbers. They look at the figures. And I think there's something that just needs to be kind of clarified a little bit here, because when I say that sometimes, people say, well, Richard Branson openly admits that he had no idea about numbers and he would just leave it to his accountant and his finance people to sort it out and everything. And the answer is, you're not Richard Branson. If you're able to do that and it works, then fine. But if it's not working, then you've got to change direction. You can't keep sort of going, well, I want to be like Richard Branson and he didn't need to know numbers, so why do I?
And I think people need to realize as well is, I mean, let's just go on that extreme case. Okay. He will have had somebody on a daily basis, I am sure, giving him a report on what was going on. Like, most people will go to their accountant once a year to do the statutory accounts. They are about as much use as a chocolate tea cozy to a business owner, because they're a snapshot of your business in the past, like sometimes 18 months in the past. So other than doing them will keep you out of trouble, that absolutely, it's going to cost you 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 a year, and it's absolutely useless to you making decisions, because you get a bad set of accounts that show a big loss. You're probably a good number of months into your new trading period. So it's like you've got to have that monthly information as a minimum for me, like that monthly information. What's going on? Am I making a profit? Am I getting loads of sales, but I've got loads of holes in my bucket? I'm spunking money on ads that don't work. I've got you brought about it before, agencies. I'm going to go to share my experience with it. I mean, I've had good and bad experiences with outside agencies, but one of common themes is your cost per lead is the lowest it's ever been. Yeah, but the leads are shit. It's like we've got to let Google learn this and got to learn that, and it's like I've always found it's helpful. You've got to bring the agency into what sales are being made, because they're looking at different things. They're looking at cost of conversion, impressions. It's like, to me, a lot of that is absolutely nonsense. If I've spent X thousand, has that generated any revenue? And that's how I've got to make my decisions on marketing spend. I can't be led by the agency saying, oh, well, it's great, this and that. And they give me a report that they've literally, it looks good, but it's a clicker. It doesn't mean anything, does it?
Yeah, I think the it's happening more now, but the key thing is to actually target profit, not the sales or the conversions. So one thing that we do is actually automatically add a column into Google Ads that tracks the gross profit. So we can say, right, these products are roughly, this is how much they cost. Therefore, this is what the gross profit would be after advertising. And and then that element, you can actually go, well, now we're making money. And and this is what we're talking about, understanding how these things work, so that you can then instruct the agency and say, I want you to target the gross profit. So we've got this column there. I want those gross profits to look like this. And then they focus on that. Now you can do that as well within Google Ads as well, you can have, certainly there's a lot of third-party software now that you can use for tracking the actual profit that you're making rather than just the sales. Because the other element that's particularly with a product-based business, the other element that is completely ignored in most cases in Google Ads is returns. Now, if you're a fashion company, you could have some products that you only get maybe a 10 or 11% return rate on, but you could have other products that get a 40% return rate. So those could look really good because they sell really, really well, but the actual amount of money you're making them is minimal. So you need some way of feeding that data back so Google Ads can show, or analytics or whatever program you're using can actually show this is how much profit that's actually making after returns, after the cost of the product, after the cost of advertising and shipping and so on. And the issue comes in when agencies, or freelancers or wherever, are not given that sort of clear guidance. They don't understand your business like you do. And they don't understand what the value is in your business. You have to explain it to them and help them create what needs to be done on there. So if you say, our gross profit typically for someone coming directly to the site is 70%. So we want the gross profit for people coming via Google Ads to be X%. Because you want to be able to track everything right down to, is that customer a valuable customer or a one-off customer? So do they come back 2 or 3 more times to buy more products, or are they just one-off customers? Because then you're paying a huge amount of money for that one-off customer. Or for other businesses, it might be, do the people who come through from Google Ads refer my company to proportionally more people than people who come through from Facebook, for example. And knowing that information means that you can go, well, yeah, we get a lot of people buying from us from Facebook, but they're not actually that great. Those aren't brilliant customers. They don't refer anybody. Their average order value is low. So why don't we take that money and put it into Google Ads where the average order value is higher and we're getting more referrals from those people. So understanding where that money can move based on the results, the real numbers, gives you a distinct advantage over just going, well, I've got Facebook ads running, I've got Google ads running, I've got TikTok ads running, so I've covered all the bases, and generally it's all okay. Now the caveat with that is that things aren't tracked directly. So people, for example, will see your business on Facebook. You'll have an ad and they'll go, oh, that's interesting. And they go, well, I wonder if this is real. Is it like a genuine thing? And then they go into Google and they type in your business name. And then you have Google showing, okay, well, here's all the reviews and here's videos and here's all of this. And they go through all of that and they go, oh, that's really good. And then they go through, maybe they click one of the links and they go through to your website and they read there a bit and they bookmark it and come back a week later. Maybe they get an email, they filled in, the email form or something. They get an email a week later, they come back. Now, being able to track all of that as well sometimes can be a little bit tricky. So now a sort of general way of looking at marketing expense is to look at it, your marketing cost as a whole, and then your overall return, and say, well, each of these is contributing. We can track some of it directly to see if it is valuable, but they're all kind of contributing in some way or another. And then you have a much better idea of the value of your marketing spend. Your trick is then, okay, which of those channels do I spend more on? And then you've got to delve into it a little bit more deeply.
Gary, it's been an absolute pleasure to have a chat with you. I've been wanting to get you on the podcast for a while, but I'm quite conscious of time. I'd definitely like to invite you on because there's so much more that I haven't actually covered today. But for people that are watching, where can they find out more about Gary Baker and what he does and how you can help these e-commerce businesses?
Okay, the best bet is just to go to ecom180.com. There's loads of things on there that explain the process and what we do. There's a fantastic assessment on there as well that you can do. It only takes 5 minutes to fill out, and it's an e-commerce health assessment. And you'd fill it out, answer 20 questions, and it'll produce a report showing what areas that you need to work on to improve your business. So definitely worth doing that.
Do you think we could get that in the show notes? I know Emily will reach out to you in the next week or so. That'd be great if we could put it on the show notes for all the platforms.
Yeah, absolutely.
To sort of end, end the podcast on a high. What is the one piece of advice that you would give a business owner watching this who is, what's the one bit of advice?
I would say get people in, get help in before you really need it. If there's one mistake that we see time and time and time again, is that problems are left too long, particularly cash flow problems. And if there's anything that you've kind of learned from this podcast, is that the longer you leave it, the deeper those problems become. So, and the earlier that you tackle it, the easier it is to fix it. So that would be the biggest bit of advice, I think, is don't be afraid to speak to someone, to speak to loads of people, get loads of advice. It doesn't cost you anything, but it could make a massive, massive difference to your business.
Gary, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining the Director First podcast. And
thanks very much, Chris. It's been great.